Good morning. George is out there somewhere. Well, all right, today we have our question and answer session. We've received a few questions, so we'll do our best with what it is that we have been given. So maybe we'll just give just a moment for people to get in and take their seats before we start afresh. As always, some of the questions will require a little bit of interpretation to get to the actual question, but we will do our best. All right, the first question talks about the second object of the TS. So, related to religion, science, and philosophy, the comparative study of religion. Okay, so the second object of the TS is to explore comparative religion, science, and philosophy. However, we tend to focus on a select few TS authors to the exclusion of the three fields put forward in the object as essential areas of study. So the three fields being comparative religion, science, and philosophy. How can we bring theosophy back in line with this second object rather than exclusively repeating the same material? So the question is, can we not just repeat the same authors, the same material, and broaden our focus to include religion as well as science and philosophy? What do you think?
Well, it's quite a pertinent question. Now, as far as, to my mind, that comparative study of religion, science, and philosophy, which we have put just to support, so that to support the seeker to reach to the other two, universal brotherhood, and also explore the intricacies, explore a person's hidden power. So I feel that this very much second objective of study, it very much supplements both the two objectives.
The study of religion, science, and philosophy is way for understand life as a whole. Then the object is not to stay on philosophy, religion, or science, but to go over it, to understand the mysteries of life. Then these objects were put 100 years ago. We need to, through them, go to what them point to, that is this comprehension in a larger way. And about the repetition of teachings. We are very used with the repetition because it's the easiest way to do things. But repetition is never the truth. If we are seekers of truth, we should be very careful when we are repeating things. Anything that is repeated is not our discovery. It's just memory. It's just a mechanical operation of the brain. Then we need to be very careful when we just repeat things.
I think that many of us who are here now, who count ourselves as students of the ageless wisdom, and particularly students of theosophy, I think very often, I know I can speak for myself, that I also looked in what you might say other directions. That whereas there is the ageless wisdom tradition that has been expressed as theosophy, there are also other wisdom traditions in the world today. And so to have something of an open mind, it seems as if we look to find truth where it presents itself. And it does in fact present itself in many different places. It is not only to be found within the boundaries of any particular society, whether it's the Theosophical Society or Buddhism. However, again, just speaking for myself, in looking through other avenues, in looking at other teachings, the reason why I find myself here is because in no case could I find anything whose scope of vision could equal what I have found in my understanding of theosophy. If, as a true person who was true to the search for truth, if there were to be something that exceeded it, then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be honest. But the fact of the matter is that for me, at least, I have found nothing that has been able to exceed its scope of vision, its capacity to give meaningful, I won't say explanations, but meaningful descriptions of the inner life and the processes involved and the unfoldment of hidden potentials. So in that sense, part of the thing that I think we end up doing is we find ourselves reverting to those voices that have been the clearest in expressing these things. And so it seems perhaps to be something repetitive. However, probably most of us have read books like The Voice of the Silence, which is a book that you read, you put it down, but you end up coming back to it again. There's this expression that you never step in the same river twice. Every time we put a foot into what we could call this river of truth, the water that is flowing and the way in which it is expressing is completely new, if we're sufficiently awake. And so to say that we are repeating something, perhaps the words that we encounter, the words that spark whatever our deepening understanding may be, are the same. But the understanding is ever evolving, we should hope. Otherwise, it is repetition. And repetition, as Marcos has said, as Uma has indicated, is deadening. It's not something conducive to the search for truth. That's all?
And someone can say something from his or her inner perception, but he needs to, or she needs to use words. And the one that is hearing can receive as a repetition. It depends on the person. And in the other hand, someone can be repeating, and the one who is hearing is discovering important things in that words. Even the stones give sermons, as said in the Mahatma letters and in the Bible. Then the thing is more profound. We need to see ourselves if we are looking for what is being said in a new way.
True. And in fact, ultimately, it is more pertinent whether we pick up the pearl of wisdom from these books, from these studies. That is the main issue. And that will lead us to the ultimate truth. to the seekers. Thank you.
Just along that same line, I know I have had the experience on a number of occasions of hearing Krishnamurti being quoted, for instance, or other teachers being quoted. And I've heard people say, as Krishnamurti said. And it is in fact a quote, but equally, many of these things that are attributed to another, you find that it's the exact same thing, the exact same wording that has been said in some other place, perhaps long, long ago. There's this expression that was, I heard just the other day, where Krishnamurti made the comment, in fact, probably I'll talk about it later, something related to consciousness and how it comes upon you like a thief in the night. And it was quoted as, as Krishnamurti says, which of course that's a quote from the Bible. And probably it's a quote from scriptures that precede the Bible as well. So truth, wherever it is expressed, when it is expressed through a consciousness that actually perceives it, the same words are brand new. Because actually there's nothing new out here. I mean, there are no new ideas, very few, let's put it that way. So it's just the way we're able to dress it up, to create the necessary atmosphere. We use truth as the means to create an atmosphere in which someone can become open. And then there's the possibility for a genuine experience. Along this same line, another question: is the TS searching for or open to examining the information of modern channels receiving divine wisdom from known or new, and then quote, masters? So is the TS searching for or open to information that are coming from contemporary channels that of perhaps individuals receiving divine wisdom from what might be called new masters? What do you think about that?
I think the masters are in history of TS. The letters are there, and we have all that history. But at some time, the policy start to be to stimulate people to reach or to feel the masters inside themselves. Not external communications with the masters. Because truth is something very powerful. And this small open of the occult thing about the existence of the masters is something very powerful. And the use of that information without the truth related to it, it can make a very big dangerous to humanity's evolution. Then, in my comprehension, there is no possibility in the actual theosophical society to receive masters, letters from the masters, or direct communication and someone speaking in name of the masters. If anyone wants to find the masters, anyone needs to find inside him or herself. According to me, this is the policy since such a moment of the historical the history of the TS.
Should I? As brother has rightly pointed out, in fact, for reaching to the new channel, it is up to each of us. Because as a theosophist, we all are seekers. And we have to, reach to that ultimate truth, to that ultimate realization, for which the door is open for every one of us. And I think it's a very good question that ultimately a person who realizes the self reaches the goal. So this is a the divine channel is open to everyone, and we all should strive hard for that. Thank you.
Just one point with this. Often when I get questions such as this, I think it's good to make some sort of a level of distinctions. The question is the TS searching for or open to examining? Is the TS open to? I do believe that from time to time we kind of blend together three things. One being the Theosophical Society, the other being Theosophy, the other being Theosophists, members of the Theosophical Society. And I think it's good to be a little bit clear on what it is we're saying. Theosophy is the ageless wisdom, something that has been and will be. It's the root of every ancient wisdom that has ever made its appearance on the human scene. So that's something distinct. Theosophy has absolutely no need for the Theosophical Society or for Theosophists. It exists whether or not such a body of people with that particular name is in existence. The Theosophical Society was said to come into being to make it known that such a thing as theosophy exists. So the organizational purpose, you could say, is to be able to present, to expose, to move people to becoming aware that such a thing as this ageless divine wisdom exists. And so Theosophists, on the other hand, those people who find themselves in search of truth, this is the one to whom this question is really being asked. That as an individual who has associated themselves with this organization, do you feel or find the necessity for divine wisdom from new sources? Have you exhausted wisdom from whatever sources it may have come from? Have you even experienced wisdom from whatever source it may have presented itself? I doubt it. Probably the idea of the capacity for new wisdom. There are perhaps new ways of expressing that wisdom, and we're seeing it really evolving before us today. Personally, I am quite impressed. It seems to be a remarkable thing, unfortunate, but also remarkable, that we as humans, we tend to learn and grow most intensely from crisis. I mean, even the process of birth is a very crisis-oriented process. But in crises is when we tend to really flower, to meet the challenges. When I look around today, there is this movement of very, very young people, people who would be too young to join the Theosophical Society without their parents' permission, who are stepping onto the world stage and speaking in very clear ways to some of the human-created issues that the entire planet is facing. Speaking in ways that cut through all of the language of politics, of economics. Very clear, very direct. And so I think in many ways there is a new expression of wisdom that is taking form in these ways that we're going to have to look at and we're going to have to honor. So the key always, they have this expression that the universe is in a grain of sand. So if in fact that's true, the only obstacle to our experience of some new truth or some new master is the fact that we're unable to perceive, because it's always right in front of us. At least that's my opinion.
Yes, but unfortunately, there are some other movements using the name of the masters, probably in a non-truly way. This is not good for all the history and for the purpose the masters had to found when they found the society. Then I think this is the effect, not desired effect of all that revelation. And we need to do a good work to make the thing valuable. Not only they have the bad effect, but the good they thought when they founded this society.
I should say that one of the things that comes along with having the position of international president, and I'm sure it's something that comes along to others who are heads of sections, is that you get letters from people around the world. Maybe you thought I was going to say you get Mahatma letters. No, none of those have been received yet. But you get letters from people around the world. And among the letters that I receive, probably there are at least, 4 or 5 letters from different people who are thoroughly convinced that they are the new Messiah. I have 4 or 5 of those that probably once a month I get a letter. Generally it's addressed to me, the Pope, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and normally they're letters that are expressions of someone's conception of the wisdom they have stumbled onto that are undecipherable. But the part of it is that they also have a following somewhere. So this is kind of the nature of discernment, which is why we always have these, we point back to these books like At the Feet of the Master, where discrimination, start there. Then find yourself a new master. As parents or teachers, can we help the children to cultivate the divine seed within? That's a good question. Anyone, or should I? Anyone? And it's open. It's open.
Well, it's a very good question. Very good question. As a parent or as a teacher, what can we do so that our children can cultivate a divine seed? That divine seed which is already within the child can be cultivated. To my mind, as a parent, sometimes as a teacher, I feel that you have to be an example. You have to make yourself example an example for the children so that we don't have to teach them anything. They emulate. They see it and they learn it, because we cannot force anything on the children. And it's the most difficult work for a parent or a teacher to come to such a stage where she or he becomes an example, because you have to have that kind of right mindset, right attitude, right personality, right kind of thinking. So this is how we can really help children in getting the seed nurtured. And of course, the environment which is created when the parent or the teacher is of such high stature, thinking-wise, elevation-wise, then the environment itself gives lot of food for the children, to cultivate that divine seed within. Thank you.
I think this is a very important question. And to those who are parents, more. I've been father on my 20s. And then I became father again on my 50s. And it's a great, very great new experience to face that again in a new phases of my life. And what I feel the first important thing is to create in your home an atmosphere of love. Because until the 7 to 10 years, the formation of the bodies, the inner bodies, is going on in a way that the children can grow without fear, without bad marks. And it's very, very important to talk with the children since they are very young, because they are very intelligent. They make questions. They want to know. They are discovering everything. And I think not only as parents, but as people who want to, in some way, help humanity to grow, to be better, we really should look more for this question about education of children. This initiative of the ATA in Adyar, based on the experience of Vic Haoxin in the Philippines, probably the society should look more for this approach, because we need the new, not for the society, but for the regeneration of humanity. And the society, the members are becoming old and old. And probably in the future, the schools will do more than the religions, because the young are really sensitive for receiving the knowledge in a different way, and for this development of our divine seed. Then I think this question is really very, very important, not only for us as parents, but for some direction we should do in our theosophical work to become not only intellectual work, but something really transformative of humankind.
Just picking up on what my two fellow panelists have said, obviously it begins with the example. I think it was Albert Schweitzer who said example is not the best way to teach, it's the only way to teach. And probably the most important area where we can be exemplary is in our unwillingness to project fear into the minds of children. Oh, they'll get enough of that before long. But as we find ourselves using fear as a method of discipline, in education, it's often the norm, where the teacher who has the most quiet classroom is the one that has instilled the greatest level of fear in their students. And that carries on. I can remember we had it was a shop class, just a simple thing where you're working with wood. And there was one teacher, and this is like 10 years old maybe. And if you weren't paying attention or if you were talking, he'd be walking around, he'd take this knuckle, and he'd come up behind you, just pop you in the head. And you would stop talking, but it got to the point in that class, if you saw a shadow fall across your work, your shoulders would get tense, and you think you're getting ready to get hit. Fear has a lasting effect. And though everybody encounters it, there's nobody who has not. The fearless person is often the unwise person. We have to be able to learn for ourselves how to interact with that, how to transform it, and then to demonstrate that to our children as well. The other things will come. All right, this is a question that I think I will hand over to someone else, one of my more capable colleagues. The question is, what is a cause of the causeless cause? I leave it to my eminent colleagues.
As you could see from the question, a difficult question and an abstract question as well. Because the cause for causelessness, it has to be realized. It cannot be explained in words. What can be the cause for causelessness? As when we go to the scriptures or when we read our the universe, how universe came into being, so we know that there is a cause. But that cause for each of us is different. Somebody calls it God, somebody calls it universal consciousness. But this causelessness there is a cause which is to be realized by a person himself. Well, question is little tricky, and I don't know whether I am on the right line. I think our president will further elaborate this.
Marcos.
I'm not sure if I am able to go into this question, because we work for a cause. The cause of the regeneration of ourselves and the cause of regeneration of humanity. But as it's been said I think in Arenda's talk this morning, we can act in favor of that cause. But the cause goes on itself in its own way, probably slowly, but it will go on. Then sometimes we are too much excited to reach this or reach that. In speaking in spiritual terms, there is nothing to be reached, but to be alive in the now, with your best comprehension. From the now, you can go into any direction. And probably, if your direction is the cause to understand yourself more profoundly, to understand life more profoundly, to understand relationship more profoundly, you will do what is expected from us in this life. Because the cause is the awakening of consciousness. And in the level that we are, this awakening comes from the truth of where we are now, not what we are projecting and excited going to search for. I don't know. This is a very complex question.
Just speaking for myself, I can say without question I feel unqualified to answer the question. Probably the best answer would be found in silence. To propagate theosophy, can we start making small talks of 12 to 15 minutes in a similar presentation as TED Talks, a PowerPoint program? So the idea is that can't we start doing smaller length talks, 12 to 15 minutes, similar to the very popular approach to talks of the TED Talks, which are now global. I should say that in our World Congress held in Singapore, we did in fact start doing that. At that point, we called them TIP Talks, Theosophy in Practice Talks, TIP Talks. The name TED was already taken. So TIP Talks, Theosophy in Practice, and they were talks of 15 to 20 minutes maximum. And I think it went quite well, actually. One of the things that actually does do, it takes an awful lot of energy and focus and time for someone to put the necessary thought into producing a talk of an hour, 45 minutes. It's a lot. And it's something that would be prohibitive to many of our members who have a great deal that they can contribute, but to say that you have to take the next hour and stand in front of people and keep them from closing their eyes and nodding their heads at the same time that you impart whatever your experience is quite demanding. So I think there's this expression that everybody has at least one book in them. Some have much more, but everybody can speak on a subject that's close to them for 12, 15 minutes. And so in a way, I think this is a trend that is here now that I think you'll be seeing more of, particularly as these conventions move ahead.
I think these questions bring us to another question. What's a talk? Generally, one talk is someone that knows will teach the others that don't know. And of course, sometimes these talks are very boring. But if we try to understand our work profoundly. We are all learners. In a talk, you are learning. You are not just putting out the things you already read. You are learning. When you put yourself in that condition, there is a kind of connection with the public that is not boring. Maybe 15 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. If there is this connection, this kind of communion, the talks is interesting. But if we are just repeating things that we read on the book, this is mechanical. There is no the vitality of the learning process. Learn together. I think we should go more profound in this question, because this is related to all our activities in the TS. And probably this is related with the lack of vitality of part of our work. We need to put our souls, our hearts, our best intelligence in any talk. Maybe 15, 13. Of course, it's a talk of all day. Probably nobody will.
Too much. I should say one of the things that, at least particularly, I enjoy with moments like this, where we have questions. We come up here, we walk up the stairs, Maria hands us a list of pieces of paper, and then you respond. So it's not something where there is a process of rehearsal. It's what I enjoy, and what, as I sit here, the kind of creativity that takes place, where things are sparked and appear in this moment that, could not have been gotten through a preparation or a rehearsal. The preparation is the life you have lived up until the time you step on stage, or until the time you give your 10 or 15-minute talk. A life lived and hopefully examined. Many theosophists, being members for more than 5 years, there are many theosophists who have been members for more than 5 years and still continue holding on to their religion with their rites, rituals, and ceremonies, riding 2 horses at the same time. Can they propagate theosophy correctly? So I guess the root of the question is, if someone is in fact a religious practitioner, does that interfere with is that an obstacle to their ability to either understand or propagate theosophy? You ever thought about that?
The question is, while following your religion, can you really pursue theosophy? But the thing is, as we know, that there is no compulsion while you join Theosophical Society to not pursue the line which you have been following. Because ultimately all these lines, all these faith, all these pursuit bring it to the same point, that is universal truth. So as religion as such, I don't think puts any kind of hindrance. Only the rituals or the outer part of the religion, which is the body of the religion, which may hinder. But if you are a true religious follower, then you are following the soul of the religion. And once you follow, that is the same soul is same with every religion. even with the theosophy. So there is no problem as so long you are following the inside, the true meaning of religion, if you are following religion in true sense. So I don't think it is a hindrance. Well, I'll give it to the President to react.
I find myself coming back to the words of Annie Besant when she was asked a similar thing, and she said that what the Theosophical Society asks is not that you leave your religion, but that you live your religion. And in so doing, you would be completely in harmony with the theosophical worldview. From the way I have been able to observe it, at least, I don't see wars breaking out between Mother Teresa and the Dalai Lama, or between any of the people who have actually had some sense of realization of their different religious practices. So I think in the practice of moving toward the depth of whatever one's religion is, often it involves ceremonies, it involves rituals, but the truth that can possibly be encountered through engaging in that process exceeds the rituals, exceeds the rites, and should be perfectly in harmony with what we would call propagating theosophy.
I think we need to make a distinction between religion institution and religion as religiosity. Because the Theosophical Society is not a religion in the sense of an institution. There is no such thing as the two horses that is in the question. Because the Theosophical Society don't want to compete institutionally with any religion. And of course, theosophy helps person to understand and profound his or her own religion, maybe each one or none of one. Because religiosity is an attitude. This is the thing that we all search for, not the institution. The institution is just the space where people come together to learn together. Probably some religions have a kind of pattern of thought that to be there, you need to agree with that pattern of thought. Fortunately, the Theosophical Society has not an official pattern of thought. Some people would like that it would exist, but there is no these things. And if we can be free of any pattern of thought, we will be open for the higher planes, for the Buddhic plane, to understand things as they are, in the inner levels, in the outside levels. This is religion, not the institution. The institution is just the space where people go to find themselves.
Okay, from the same questioner, can we propagate letter number 10 from the Master's letters to A.P. Sinnett without fear and remove 67% of evil in the world? Just to refresh your memories, that letter number 10 relates to the source of evil, the source of 66, 2/3 of all evil in the world comes through the religious practices of the world. That's part of what that letter says. So the reference here is saying, can we not practice without fear and remove, I assume that would be remove religious practice from the human experience? Probably not. At least my reading of history. For a number of decades, you had the experience in China and in the Soviet Union, for instance, where religion as the opiate of the masses was something that was not allowed to be openly practiced. So over the course of the period where the people who first became involved in that system lived their lives and died, another generation came into being that had had no exposure to religious practice, that had in fact been banned from the practice of religion. And so that went on for this period, perhaps 2 generations. As soon as the suppression of religious life ended with the fall of those various systems, what was it that happened? As if it was, plants rising up out of the ground. Religions of all different types sprang back into being. The Orthodox Church in Russia is, the next thing to the actual political government of the country. So religion as something in many ways, it is a continuing need of the human heart. The perception that there is, in fact, something that exceeds this experience that we encounter in the outer world, you can't kill it out. And the fact that you have organized systems that speak to that is something that will always be attractive to people. That's my opinion.
I think we need to respect the freedom of all people in their own lives. This letter says about a very big problem because most of religions explore the fear of death, the fear of this, the fear of that. And many of that make a lot of money with all this fear. This is the real problem. But the question is not to attack them. The question is to understand about fear inside ourselves. To understand that humanity is in a level that most part of it wants to be guided by hands. Okay, but do we want to be guided by hands? That's the question. And then we don't need to attack anyone, any religion. We need to respect, but to understand the real problem. That is this exploitation of fear. This is the real problem.
This one, I'm trying to make a question. It seems in cycles, revelation of truth are given. The foundation is respected and honored. The new is examined, assessed, and integrated. Here, now many are presenting revealing aspects of truth that integrate science and esotericism, or the ageless wisdom. The examples are the electric universe, synthesis, and near-death experience. Will an emphasis on this area of new revelations attract the young intellectuals? So, will an emphasis on some of the emerging ideas, electric universe, synthesis, near-death experience, will that be something that might be attractive to young intellectuals?
I think there is freedom for everyone to put emphasis in whatever they think is something to be shown. This freedom is a characteristic of the Theosophical Society. And we do not ask for the leaders to put emphasis in this or that. We are members. We can put the emphasis in whatever we think is useful, is really something good for the comprehension.
I think new ideas are always welcome. There is no problem. But the thing is, the theosophy which provides us with the base, with the foundation, which prepares us to enter into the new arena. Because there are so many things available all over universe. It is for each of us to choose the path or to enter into the new kind of experiences. But at the same time, it is very important that we have the sound foundation so that we don't go astray. We remain on path. So that is my take on this.
Okay. I think those are two worthy answers. Last question. Can the society, and I assume this is the Theosophical Society, think of launching some scholarship or award for comparative study anywhere in the world? And that, the last part I can't really read well. So can the society think of launching some scholarship or award for comparative study anywhere in the world? And I think the idea is that that would be an encouragement. I do know that there are various places in the world where that is already being done. I know for a fact that in Australia there is such a thing, and in other sections around the world. So it is in fact something that is done, and it's done often in various groups inside of India as well. So that's something that has been undertaken, is still being undertaken. Brazil? Good.
I think the scholarship part, I'm not very aware of this. Yes, this is a very good idea for having the scholarships. In fact, in various colleges, even in India, the scholarship stage hasn't come as yet, but we are trying to introduce people to this new area. Our college students and also outsiders having competition in various lodges, in various federations. We are having this kind of competition, but awarding scholarship, I don't think it has yet started on Theosophy as yet. Thank you.
Well, all right. I'd like to thank you all, first of all, for your attention. It's always very helpful to us up here. And also thank those of you who submitted questions for actually sparking this conversation that we've been able to have together. So that brings this program to a close. Thank you.